Hello and welcome back to another episode of Fully Booked, the Hidden Gems author podcast, in which Craig Touch and myself, Roland, chat some of the leading lights and interesting figures in this crazy industry we're in of writing and self-publishing. And today we are actually extending a little beyond writing. We are talking about a tool which our guest believes every writer should have, and that is a podcast. I am very, very happy to welcome Freddy Cruz from Speak Podcasting to Fully Booked. How are you doing today, Freddy?
Fantastic. I can neither confirm nor deny that I'm a leading light, though, as indicated in your intro. But thank you so much for the invite, gentlemen.
We are delighted to have you. And of course, we wouldn't be here without the man himself, Craig Touch, the owner and founder of Hidden Gems. How are you doing today, Craig?
Doing great, Roland. Thanks for joining us, Freddie. Yeah, you have a podcast agency, which we'll talk about as well. But when you and I were talking, you were saying that your belief is that every writer should have a podcast. I think that it is a tool that could be in a writer's toolbox, but I'm not totally convinced that every writer needs one. We're going to have a lot of podcasts if that's the case. But listen, I'm welcoming you to make your case. And, we can at least give writers an idea of what a podcast can do for them, why they might consider starting one. For somebody who runs an agency, who does, from the ground up sort of podcasts, not necessarily hosting, but setting up and scheduling and all that stuff, you're the one to talk to about that. So why don't you tell us a bit about yourself and how you got started with all this, and we'll go from there.
Absolutely. I am a former, I won't say retired, but I am a former radio broadcaster. And I sort of fired the corporate media overlords at the end of 2021. And after about 6 months of job hunting, 400 applications, over 55 rejections, and a handful of interviews that went awry, I decided, well, I'm 1,000% unhireable, but who's the one person that can hire himself? Me. So I hired myself and launched my own media company, and it's been a whirlwind. It's entrepreneurship, as I'm sure both of you can validate, is an entire roller coaster of emotions. The ups, the downs. One day it's the best day in the whole wide world. 2 days in a row it's the worst day ever, and you're questioning all of your life choices. So that's pretty much what's led me to 2023 is radio. But I also took a foray into writing fiction in 2019 because I was challenged by my daughters, and so I wrote a book that neither one of them are interested in, but they said that I should write a book. And so who am I to back down from a challenge from two small kids? So I decided to write a book. I knew the novelty of them challenging me to write would eventually wear off, which it did because they were teenagers, and they still are. So I wrote a sort of dystopian kind of political thriller, and I got hooked on writing. I've written 3 books total since 2019. It's fun. And so, yeah, I do a little bit of everything.
And then, listen, I agree about everything you said in terms of entrepreneurship and stuff. And that is true. Once, if nobody else can hire you, start a business. But no, so how did that lead you to wanting to start your own podcasting, company, as opposed to just, doing your writing and doing your own kind of podcast? Why, go the route of starting that whole media company? What made you decide to do that in terms of everything you could have done as an entrepreneur?
One of those interviews that did not go right. I actually was willing to work for a third of what I was making in my previous radio world, and I was actually doing rather well. They took very good care of me, and it just unfortunately accountants happen. And so, I went out on my own accord and was like, this isn't for me. I'm getting out while it's still fun. So I tried to apply for a job that was that paid significantly lower. And upon doing the research of this company that I tried to get a job with, it was guest booking. And I didn't get the job. And I got really angry because I was overqualified. It was for a guest booking. And I'm like, look, I've booked hundreds of interviews in my previous life. You mean to tell me I can't get a job for a third of the pay? Screw this. It was actually a different word. Screw this. I'm gonna show everybody that I can run my own business. And so it's a slog. Tony Robbins says that we often overestimate what we can do in a year and underestimate what we can do in 5. And so I'm counting on him being right on the 5-year trajectory. He was absolutely right about the 1-year trajectory. It's a slog.
He definitely is. That is true.
Yeah.
Well, listen, it seems like it's the right, path for you from radio broadcasting in this new, internet, not new anymore, but, in an internet-enabled world. I guess less people are listening to the radio, more people are listening to podcasts and that sort of stuff. So, it's, to me, it's not necessarily a downward move, but it, at least, lateral, if not up. So, good on you for doing that.
So I started in the radio business myself, and I'm constantly amazed how I have a bigger reach than the radio station I used to sell advertising for.
Yep.
Yeah, and it's kind of crazy.
Yeah, and I'm curious how it goes in the UK and elsewhere in Europe, Roland, because here in the United States, I mean, we're talking about radio stations airing anywhere between 6 and 8 minutes worth of ads twice an hour in most hours. And within those, let's go meet in the middle. Let's say 7 minutes in a 7-minute spot block. It's not 7 60-second ads. It could be three minutes. It could be 3 60-second ads. And then the remaining 4 minutes could be any combination of 30 seconds and then 15-second ads. And so the radio listener doesn't hear, all they hear is the amount of units. So it could be 25 ads over the span of 7 minutes. And that is bananas. And the radio model, and I'm not trying to poo-poo on my former industry, I'm just saying that the model is broken, and people that are still in that world, I feel for them. I pray for them. I wish them nothing but the best, at least the ones who I have a deep admiration for. But I mean, it's like upper management, the corporate overlords really got to get their acts together if they expect to have any or maintain any of what remaining listeners they have.
Absolutely. I moved off to Sirius Radio, which has no ads, but now podcasts seem to be something that even satellite radio can't compete with, because it's bespoke. You can just choose what you want to listen to at any particular time, whatever mood you're feeling.
Yeah. And the really cool thing about podcasting is that there's a stat, and I apologize for not remembering it, but there's a certain percentage, it's a rather high percentage of people are willing to sit through ads on a podcast, and not one, and then 2, they're more likely to purchase an ad from somebody, from the host that is endorsing that product, which is sort of parallel to a radio host, like back in my world, where I would endorse a local Volkswagen or Subaru dealership or a wireless phone carrier, where I would endorse them. And it was sort of that kind of thing where it's a 30 or 60-second read. You get paid by the client. And so I love the cat. Oh my gosh. We got a debut from the cat. Oh, that's so cool.
He didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, I love animals. In fact, I can talk about animals all day. But no, it's that's the beauty of podcasting, is that it's very listener centric, and listeners intuitively know that. They're not going to be force fed what terrestrial radio force feeds them. And then under the guise of public service or monetization, they're not going to be force fed 25 minutes worth of ads over a 7-minute spot block. And you've got a screaming lawyer talking about how if you get hit by an 18-wheeler, he's going to milk that 18-wheeler driver for all he's worth, followed by somebody screaming at you to buy their used car, followed by somebody asking whether or not you want to go and, I don't know, get tested for an STD. And then the client gets pissed off because, well, the ROI didn't quite work out. And it's like, well, we're thinking that's a good thing, because few people are going in to get tested for STDs, which means, I don't know, fewer people are really concerned about that. So there you go. I'm off the soapbox.
Well, I mean, listen, that's if people even listen to the ads. If I'm in my car and ads come on, I just switch to another station, so
Yeah.
I don't know how effective they really are anyway.
I think the other interesting thing about that is, though, just as you said, the host reading something tends to have a higher number of people actually engage with that. When you're doing a podcast, you can do it by yourself. I mean, I know from personal experience, there are a couple of products that I have an affiliate code for. The products, I really, really believe in them. And then I make every few months, like over $1,000 from people buying that product because I endorsed it. And it's interesting. That means there is a route for a podcaster to be commercially viable as a podcaster, just doing something different to how radio does it. I mean, yeah, finding those products that you really believe in and endorsing them for your listeners, and then you're actually making real money.
And I will tell you, this is the petty part of why I believe in podcasting for everybody so much, authors included, is that, well, the institutions don't want you to know that. They don't want future Roland. They don't want, I don't know how long you've been monetizing your show, but let's say it was 5 years ago, you just learned about it, right? Well, they don't want Roland from 6 years ago knowing that you can build an audience, because they'd be satisfied with you not even having a podcast. And I know this from firsthand experience. They do not want the everyday person to launch a podcast. And I say, you know what? Stay mad. Stay mad, because the future is decentralized, and people nowadays, once we finally, I say we, collectively speaking, once we realize that the true power that we hold, that we can communicate with the people that we want to communicate with, and we can build our own communities, we don't need the overlords anymore. And I promise I'm not bitter. I believe in the medium.
You made my heart beat a little harder listening to that wonderful speech.
All right, well, so let's go into that then. So why would any author, let's say, need a podcast? What will it do for them, other than we touched on the idea that at some point they'd be able to endorse products if to their readers, or to their listeners, if once they've built up an audience that trust them and believe, that what they're, that they're not just there to try to sell them stuff. So what would an author get from a podcast other than that? And what would a normal author want to say in this podcast? What sort of topics? Are they just talking about their books, or what are they doing?
Yeah, I think the answer is really threefold, Craig. I think that, let's just say, for instance, let's say we're talking about me, Freddy, and I am a wannabe author, and I've launched my first book, When America Fell Silent, and so I'm going to launch a show that is going to be centered around authors who write political thrillers and mysteries. And so I can have on, let's just say for argument's sakes, Roland and Craig are thriller writers, and I can have guys like you on my show, and we can talk about the craft of writing thrillers. Or two, we can have a podcast where it's just Freddy talking about his author journey. Like, hey, I wrote chapter 1 and it sucked. Can I say donkey balls? I guess I just did. And it sucked really bad. And chapter 2, I know that it's going to get better. And then you can go on and make another episode, or you can turn your book into an actual podcast. And that is something that really intrigues me, because I know there are fiction podcasts out there, and I feel like, and as someone who's in this world, I don't see very many of them. I feel like there could be more. In fact, I'm doubling down on the art of podcasting as a viable medium for reaching an audience. I'm doubling down. My latest book is Allow Me to Ruin Your Christmas, and I'm going to have a buddy who does voice narration for audiobooks. I'm going to have a buddy read it. And so I'm publishing that book as a podcast. I haven't decided if I want to monetize it, like have it subscription based, or if I'm just going to throw it up and leave it up there for free and just kind of drip it for the month of November until Christmas, until the beginning of December. So then everybody can listen to it for free. And if they want, they could just buy the actual book. And that's kind of sort of how I monetize it. I haven't decided. I haven't gotten that far. I just know that it's going to be a podcast. Is it going to be paid subscription or is it going to be free? Might do that. I don't know. But those are the ways that an author could benefit from having a podcast. And really, if somebody likes to, let's say, Craig, you have a sizable following on social media. Well, that audience doesn't belong to you. It belongs to Zucks. It belongs to, if you're on X, formerly Twitter, it belongs to Elon. The audiences, that's rented space. But much like with an email list, a podcast belongs to you. That's it. So all you really need is of course, social media does help. It's a huge help. At the end of the day, though, it's rented. It's rented. It's an Airbnb. But with your email list, that's your home. And then a podcast could be your vacation home. You could even divide your show up into seasons, or you could just start up per book or whatever. I mean, the possibilities really are endless. The audience is yours, just like with the subscriber list. And then what you could do is you can drip content. We call it the content avalanche. At Speak Podcasting. You know where my mind is. It's Friday. So yeah, it's the content avalanche. So you got the podcast. You can use certain parts for a newsletter, certain parts for an Instagram video, or maybe TikTok, or maybe Facebook. Facebook Reels are huge. So if you have a nice chunk of audio that you can get down into less than 60 seconds, you can make a reel. And so really, it just fires me up. I think that every author can. And maybe not should, but I think every author can have a podcast. And when I say not everybody should, well, it's like if you expect to be Rogan, then podcasting is not for you. Maybe you shouldn't. Maybe you should pursue something else. But if you like the idea of truly owning your personal brand and really trying to grow and trying something new, and you're in this for the long game, then I think podcasting is absolutely for you.
I think you could say exactly. I think that it's a proven model because those of us who are successful self-published authors did the same thing. And there's a guy, Nick Stevenson, who always says, as a self-published author, you need 10,000 readers. If you can have 10,000 readers, which is a drop in the ocean compared to the millions of people who read books, you can have a six-figure career as a self-published author. And it seems like podcasting, the more you talk about it, the more it seems like a natural choice. Because if you are gaining an audience of podcasting, you don't even need to worry about like shilling a product, because you have the product, which is your books. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, you are the product, and your fans are going to be clamoring for more. It's like, well, golly, all I see are 2 Instagram posts a week from Craig and Roland. I mean, what if I want to hear these guys talk for an hour, or 2 hours for 2 episodes a week, or whatnot? And then the idea behind having an interview format show where Freddy is talking to Roland, or Craig is talking to Roland, or whatever combination, is that you grow your audience by being on another podcast host's show. So you're reaching a new audience, and people will be like, you know what? I like this Roland guy, and his book sounds amazing. So I'm going to go and buy a book. And then they go and buy Roland's book. They're like, wow, I really trust Craig's judgment on that. That Roland guy he brought on, he's badass. I bought the first book I bought. Well, oh, damn, he's got a whole series. I'm going to go and buy the whole thing. And then you never know how many people are going to think just like that. And then it's like it's off to the races after that.
Yeah,
so I mean, there's a few ideas there, right? And if you're an author and you're, okay, so you're talking about your journey as a writer, is having problems with this or having problems with that, and then the idea of, turning it into episodes, and I guess you mean like sort of reading it, almost like an audiobook cut into chunks, almost like Amazon Vella, but with audio, so those are good ideas, but but how does the author sort of grow their audience beyond, who they already have, right? So, when they say launch that, they're going to put that out there in the world to their readers, their mailing list or whatever. And those are the readers that are already, connected to them in some way. They're already fans, they're already, customers. So they might be interested in that journey, or they might be interested in listening to the book as an audio book. But if you're really going to have this provide value, you would be wanting to grow your audience beyond who you already had. So how would authors do that?
By going on other people's shows. And just like with the example, someone likes Roland, and they're like, this guy sounds legit. I want to go and buy all of his books. Someone likes Craig, that guy's legit. I'm going to go and buy Craig's books. And then word of mouth. It's really long game is what it is. Or if you're talking about someone that's maybe hosting a solo show, what you could do is you can make the podcast to where, because you are the brand and it's centered around your author journey. And so at the beginning and at the end, or maybe even in the middle somewhere, you could have some sort of freebie. And maybe it's not a free copy for the first 25 people who do an Apple Podcast review, or maybe it's like, hey, can you show me a screenshot of your review, and I'm going to take all of the entries from my Instagram stories, and I'm going to pull a winner on at the time of this recording, it's August 18th. At the end of September, I'm going to pull a winner. So it could be something as easy as that. You could totally gamify something like this without sounding smarmy and salesy. And I know that's something that we authors kind of cringe at, because it's like we're writing for the art of it, And so we don't want to be that smarmy salesperson that's like, hey, buy my book because it's really awesome and stuff. You can really build the product into what you're doing without having to sound that way at all. And of course, something like this really does help if you are extroverted. If you're introverted, it's going to be a learned skill. It's going to be a long journey. And then people are going to kind of you sort of feel that energy when it's not second nature for you. The three of us can come on a mic and talk shop and talk about books and podcasting, and it's easy for us. And I get it. I totally get it. Not every author is going to be up for that challenge, and that's cool. Maybe hosting a show isn't for you, but you can still try and get guest spots, just like you would try and get a guest blog spot or try and do some sort of email news drop or something.
That's really, really interesting.
Yeah.
I'm good every now and then. Thank you.
Yeah.
I found a lot of the stuff you've been saying, like, kind of mind expanding in terms of like, oh, there are all these opportunities that are open to you that for some reason we're like close ourselves off to or don't even consider.
It's a little bit of the radio bug coming out in me. And like I said, I had it really good, man. I was lucky. I was great friends with my boss to the point where her husband and I would send private text messages to each other and kind of joke around about things. And so, I mean, I was quite fortunate. And, when I say I'm not bitter, I promise I'm really not. I know where the butter was bred. And so I think that's the cliche, but I know where I come from and I can't escape it. I embrace it. And so a lot of these concepts and some of the stuff that I've been talking about with you guys comes from that world where I did a lot of promo contest writing, and we did a lot of gamifying with listeners, trying to build our audience and such. It's far different, the radio world, far different in 2023 than it was when I got in the mid 90s. I know I don't look a day over 21, but still, it's way different. But I mean, at the end of the day, people love games. We love, going to the next level, beating the monster, slaying the dragon, getting to the next level, winning the game, doing the thing. We love the journey.
It's always another mountain to climb kind of thing. That's the dream. That's why I moved to America. There we go.
Yeah, I think, a lot of writers are going to, the mental block, I think, for them is you come from this writing world, self-publishing writing world, where the way that you typically advertise your books is the standard, the ads and getting yourselves in the newsletters and whatever. So they're not everyone is sort of in that mindset of all these different ideas of how to get your podcast known and gamify. I mean, these are new things to me. I never thought about those things either. It's and unless everybody has a podcast, if you don't know the people that have them, you don't know where to go to get on other people's podcasts. So I think it's probably a new sort of learning curve for authors, as opposed to coming from just writing books and advertising their books. That might be a challenge.
Absolutely. And the great thing about this for any author who is hearing our discussion and is like, you're right, I have no idea where to look. There's this fantastic place. It's called Google. And you can just look up the top 100 podcasts for writers. And it's mind-blowing because I've actually got this, I've got a subscription to this website. I do guest booking services. I've got a subscription to this website called Rephonic. It's REPHONIC. So phonic, like hooked on phonics. So rephonic.com. I don't know that they still have the free trial. If it's worth going just to see if they give you the free 7-day trial. It's like Google, but for podcasts. And it gives you, I'm lighting up because your mind is going to be, your head, it's going to break your head, I promise. So what's going to happen is you do a search for, let's just say, I've been using the thriller author, let's say romance. Do a search for romance writing podcasts, and you can search by topic, by podcast title. So let's make up a podcast name. The Romance Podcast. Lame, I know, but it's the first thing to come to mind. You can look up, oh, I heard there was a romance podcast. Let's do a search. Oh, the Romance Podcast has 5,000 listeners every month. I think that's pretty suitable for my, I don't know, let's make up another example, for my 10,000 follower cumulative audience on social media, and send a pitch. And you've got contact info. You've got every single social media following broken down, how many years they've been podcasting, when their last episode was. And again, it's got their website and their email address, so you can boom, click. And then here's the really cool part. I don't know if this comes with the, and I promise they don't pay me to say this. All right. I'm paying them quite well. But they have this thing where you can have AI generated pitch email. It's crazy.
Everything's AI generated now. Oh
yeah. I'm AI generated. How do you know I'm not human, Craig?
Well, I can see you there. Listening might be a harder problem. I was just looking at the site. So they do still have their 7-day free trial. So that is definitely something to check out. I wonder if we're even on there. So that's a great resource. And for authors that look, there's a lot more of a technical learning curve to doing a podcast than there is to just writing, right? With writing, you can just open up your word processor, which most of us are familiar with already, and just start writing, and then upload it to KDP. You can hire somebody to do your cover, or you can do one if in Paint if you want to, but and you could be up and running the day after. With podcasts though, we can attest to the fact that there's more to it. And not everyone is going to have those skills or want to learn those skills. So that's probably one of the challenges. But as you can attest, you don't have to do it all yourself, right? That's sort of, there are companies that do that. And I think yours is probably one of them, right? Where you would do a lot of the stuff for the authors.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, there are production companies that somebody can hire. They're also you could, if somebody, let's just say somebody is just getting started. I tell you what, let's give an example of somebody who, Roland, you were talking about the 10,000 book kind of, that standard. Like you're officially, you can make it if you sell 10,000 books. So let's say somebody sells 10,000 books for the first time, and they're like, all right, I want to get to 50,000. I want to get to 100,000, but I need a different, I need something new and different because whatever ad campaign or whatever ad program isn't going to get me there. I need to do it. I want to try something different. I know I've heard that podcasting might be a good fit. So what am I going to do? Well, you could hire a production company, or you could, again, learn how to do this on your own. Probably, unless you're really fascinated with the audio production world, most likely going to be intimidated or just uninterested. It is kind of boring for people who are not into it. I could put you to sleep talking about EQ and limiting and compression, Pro Tools, yawn. I love it. I'm in the world. But that's not for everybody. So what you could do is you can find somebody on Fiverr. There are production people who are across the world. I mean, let's face it. What $100 could get us, or what $1,000 could get us. Well, that same price point is like 6 months of living for somebody across the world who can do it in no time, probably better than somebody who is up north in whatever Michigan, no offense to Michiganders, who is up north living in mom's basement trying to learn how to use Audacity. So you can, there is help out there, and you can purchase this help, or you can hire somebody to do the editing. You can get a VA, a virtual assistant, who is here in the United States if you want to shop American. That's cool. I'm wearing Ben Franklin on my shirt. I believe in America. You can hire American. You can hire outside across the world. You could, or if you don't want to deal with somebody, you can use artificial intelligence, or this is even better. You can go strip down completely naked. You can script your podcasts. You don't have to use a produced show open or anything. You could just read something like, "This is the Craig Podcast, and I'm Greg Touch. This is a podcast about writing for awesome writers and awesome editors. And episode 1, we're going to talk to Freddy and how much his new book absolutely sucks. And here's why." And so you can do it like that. At the end of the day, there's always a way.
And that's pretty much how we do it.
That's right. You know, we're stripped down bare bones over here too.
Yeah.
So what is it that your company does, though?
Yeah, it's soup to nuts. It's everything from ideation to execution. So let's say somebody has an idea for a show about books, and I would say, okay, here are 10 ideas for a name. Let's say this person has a budget, and they, we're not going to talk money here, but let's just say they do have a budget. And so this is what I can do. We can go from ideation to execution. I can, as one prospect of mine said, "How do you get the podcast into this?" And for people not watching the video, I'm holding up my smartphone. "How do you get the podcast into this?" And I'm like, that's what I do, baby. They're online hosting sites. So yeah, I help people understand how exactly to get their show into this right here. And so I try basically I'm like the janitor, and I hate to put it that way, but I'm like the janitor who's doing all the things that a podcaster doesn't want to do. I clean house. I clean the workspace. That way, a podcaster, all they have to worry about is showing up and rocking the mic. They want help procuring guests. I can do that. They want to be a guest on other shows. I can do that too. Scouting, researching, emails, production, getting license-free music. I mean, it's whatever someone needs is I'm there. And I've been dabbling around with Midjourney, which is like ChatGPT, but for static images. And I've been building sample podcast cover art pieces. And I'm obsessed with every single thing about podcasting, with the exception of people who podcast and aren't serious about it.
So you do everything, everything, or just whatever somebody needs. That sounds like the best kind of business model.
Yeah, but solely focused on podcasting.
Right.
It's like podcasting is the centerpiece, and it's like if that's what you want, we do that. But don't ask me to try and get you a TV spot. And I know
Right.
TV people, and I love them. Right. So it's all centered around that one thing.
Right. What I mean is, if somebody has no idea of what to do, they can come to you and you could get them going completely. Or if somebody's like, I can do most of it, but I just can't do all of it, then you can help them with the pieces that they can't do around podcasting.
Help them clean house, help them take care of business.
And do you help them? Because I know that, you had mentioned, not during this podcast, but separately, you mentioned that you had a couple of your clients get into the top 30 of their respective podcast categories. So are you helping people sort of expand their reach as well? That's another thing you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've been quite fortunate. My first two podcast production clients did break into the top 30. One of them got inside the top 10. In fact, it was number 8 within Apple nonprofits, Apple Podcasts under the nonprofit category, which is huge, and they absolutely deserve it. This client is actually a breast cancer facility that provides screening for uninsured and underinsured women. And so, it's something. When you're able to score a client that is serious about the craft of podcasting and that sort of gives you the keys to the building and is like, okay, let's do this because we've been wanting to do this. Where were you? In fact, this particular client, when I had gone to her, and I've known her for years. She's the co-founder. The organization is The Rose. And when I had, it was a couple of months after I had launched my business under a different name, and I asked if she wanted to meet up because I'm like, I don't even know what I'm doing. I'm just going to start DMing people. And so I messaged her and was like, let's meet. I have something I want to ask you. And so she invited me to her office, and I worked up a nice little proposal on Canva and used some images with their logo. And her response was, Freddie, where have you been? We've been wanting to do this since 2018. And it was 2022. And I'm like, oh my God, you just totally set the high bar. I wish I would have gotten like 10 rejections before presenting to you, because now I've got unrealistic expectations of what I can do.
Yeah, it's all downhill from here.
Yeah, I mean, quite literally. Yeah,
it's
like hitting a home run at your first at bat and then striking out 30 straight times.
but that wasn't your only one. You said you had at least 2 that made it.
Yeah. But
so
still.
But yeah, so that's sort of everyone's dream. But obviously, like you said, we're not all doing this to become Joe Rogan, and none of us pretty much are going to get there. But you don't need to be, right? Especially for authors, if that's not necessarily. You have to be realistic, right? With a podcast like Joe Rogan's, the reach is a lot. The potential reach is a lot more than for a writer who's talking about their book or their genres or their writing journey. Just like, I'm realistic about this podcast. Like, it doesn't have the potential reach of everybody. It has a potential reach of authors. It's an author focused podcast. So if you're not an author, it's not the podcast for you. And so you have to limit your expectations when it comes to, how big your podcast is going to be, based on how big the potential audience is.
Joe Rogan had the advantage of having a huge audience, which he brought to his podcast, whereas most podcasters start off with nothing.
Right, but he talks about such a wide range of things, right? So it can really appeal to everyone.
And I'm really happy that you and Roland are touching on this, because of course Rogan gets gets the name mentioned because he's got the recognition. Again, he was highly successful before, whether it's comedian or being on TV. What was it, Fear Factor for all those seasons? So he had the built-in audience. Also, he's been doing it. Let's just pretend for 1 second that he wasn't famous. Okay, let's just pretend that he was a no-name comedian who maybe had a couple thousand YouTube subscribers. Well, he's been doing this forever, and he just never stopped. And so that's the kind of mentality that you would have to have. And it's the same thing when you're thinking about really anything. It goes beyond it goes beyond being a creative, whether you're an author or a podcaster or a YouTuber or a TikToker or a musician for that matter. You're not going to get a brain surgeon isn't going to be the world's best brain surgeon 6 months after graduating from medical school. We're talking some of these people are deep into their 40s or 50s before they win some kind of award. So this is like a lifelong thing, and you've got to really be in it for the long run if you expect any kind of ROI, which is why, I think there should be, as much as I hate the word should, which is why I think there should be a ton of podcasts, but not everybody should become a podcaster based on expectations.
Right. And I mean, there's also like for Rogan and a lot of other people that started when podcasting wasn't so big and there was a lot less competition. There were a lot less podcasts to listen to. People found that one, and then people tend to stick with what they know. So it was the same, when Roland and I started writing romance, 10 years ago, it wasn't anywhere near what it was now. It was way easier to publish a book and be very successful at it because there wasn't as many books out there. There wasn't as much competition. And so, people found you, they bought your book, and then, you became successful. And with the podcast, I think it's probably, partially that is, people that started way back then, there was less competition. Now it's, there are a lot of podcasts, and that's why I keep coming back to the idea of like how you get found, because there are so many podcasts and people can only listen to a certain amount in their, you have a certain amount of time in the day where you can listen to podcasts. And so you can't listen to all of them. So it's always a matter of, differentiating yourself from the others and finding your audience and really, attracting people to your specific podcast over all the other choices they have.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I neglected to mention when talking about audience growth and how do you get your podcast discovered, it's not just showing up on other people's podcasts as a guest. It's also getting out. It's getting out in the public. It's having relationships with indie booksellers as indie authors. I'm an indie author myself. It behooves us to have relationships with people who run these independent bookstores or even chain stores that are very much interested. I know we've got a Barnes and Noble on the south side of Houston where they have an entire section that's titled of local interest. So it's necessary to get out there and forge those relationships with people, and even beyond a bookstore. Maybe let's say you've got a gigantic, I don't know, a car wash. I'm in Texas, and this morning on my way to go see my daughter run cross country in League City, I, no joke, saw a warehouse-sized car wash, and I forget the name of the business, but it was I don't know, Freddy's Car Wash and Grill. And so it's a huge restaurant and a car wash. And so maybe it's as simple as meeting the owner and forging a relationship with the owner and be like, hey, I see that you sell t-shirts and Texas merch, but did you know that I also wrote this really awesome dystopian book that's based in Texas? What would it take to get my book sold here? And so you could do that wherever you are. It's all about finding a creative solution and thinking outside of the scope of what we traditionally believe. So, yeah, I think there's a lot. And I know we're probably about to wrap up, but I wanted to throw the stat that I heard on the is it Chris Williamson? Chris Williamson podcast. He's like a Joe Rogan, but he's British and he lives in Texas also. It's 90% of podcasters never make it past episode 3. And of that remaining 10%, 90% never make it past episode 20. And so you couple those two stats with, and there's no way to really tell exactly how many podcasts there are in the podcasting universe, but there are upwards of 4 million shows, okay? And a range of between, depending on what study you read, and you can look this up, you can look it up on the internet, between 500,000 to 750,000 active podcasts. And that is a lot. It's a big number. But then you compare that with how many millions of Facebook users there are, how many millions of YouTube channels there are, how many millions of Twitter users and Instagram users. So if there's somebody who's trying to build a following on YouTube or whatnot, well, you don't own that following, 1. 2, you want to try something new. Maybe podcasting is for you, and it's still very early, very, very early, very early.
I heard somebody say when self-publishing started, it is going to change the model from being 100 authors who sell 1 million books each to 1 million authors who sell 100 books each, and maybe that's the same with podcasting.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to your point, you don't have to have a huge audience. It doesn't take a Rogan size audience. I always forget the gentleman's name. Was it Kevin Rose or Kevin Kelly? Anyway, the article is 1,000 true fans. And so if you got 1,000 true fans every year, and the premise of the article is if you get 1,000 true fans who you can get to buy $100 worth of your thing. And again, this is without being the smarmy salesperson, but we all have to make money to make a living. And so we have to get over that fact. Okay. You have 1,000 true fans who spend $100, and you could divvy that up, whether it's a book and a t-shirt, a book and a coffee mug or whatever. That's $100,000. Maybe you want $200,000, or maybe you're like cool with 50,000. You do the math, but it always centers around the 1,000 true fans, or what Seth Godin calls your minimum viable audience. So,
yeah,
really interesting.
Yeah, and
fired up.
It sounds like we're not doing too bad, because now we're in the 80s on the number of episodes. So we're what's that in terms of the percentage of people that fail on their podcasts after 3 or 20 episodes? We're doing pretty good then.
We're the really stubborn ones.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and good. Y'all should keep it up.
Well,
Unfortunately,
we are running out of time. So, I mean, this discussion has been really, really not just fascinating, but also inspirational. So, Craig, do you have any final thoughts?
Listen, I totally think that there is a need for, some authors to expand their reach and do other things to get more, to get a bigger following. And a lot of times they're not sure on how to do that. And a podcast might be the way to go for a lot of them. I think there's some good ideas there in terms of what they can do, the writing journey or talking or breaking the book into segmented, chapters or pieces. And so, definitely I think that this is something that authors should really consider. But, before they do, they have to really look into what goes into it and how, it's not that easy. It's not as easy as writing a book, but it's not impossible either. And, there are sources like yourself that can definitely help. So I think it's been, like Roland said, it's been a fascinating discussion for us, for sure. And hopefully for the listeners as well. So thanks again for coming on.
I really, really appreciate you all inviting me to crash your party.
Well, Freddie, where can people find out about Speak Podcasting and what you do?
Gonna make it really easy, baby. Speakpodcasting.com, and that's SPEKE, speakpodcasting.com.
Wonderful. Well, we'll make sure to leave a link down there. While you're down there, if you're listening or watching on YouTube, make sure you leave a comment for Freddy to let him know how much you appreciated what he had to say today. Also, hit that like button. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. And we'll be back next week with another episode of Fully Booked. So until then, thank you very much. Cheerio.